All right, let's get started then. Good afternoon. It is Monday, the 3rd of October. And the first thing I want to go over very quickly is what I sent you this morning. And that is that we are going to start discussing MongoDB, which is a NoSQL database system. We're going to start that in just a few minutes. All right. And that's pretty much how we're going to spend most of the week. We're going to be doing today, we're going to just talk about Mongo and we'll do the install, etc. And we'll start taking a look at it. All right. And tomorrow, we're going to look at working with the Mongo shell. And just so you can see that, so you have some experience doing that, we're going to do some exercises together. And then I'm going to give you some exercises to do. And then probably already starting Wednesday, we're going to get into Mongoose, which is basically the way that you take MongoDB and you bring it into your node programs. Okay. Now, I sent you an email right before class started today, not this one, which was sent at this morning, but I sent one right before class. And what I wanted to show you was this. Not sure exactly how I'm going to do this, so just bear with me for a second, if you would, please. Let's see. All right. I sent you this 6-part series by a guy, he calls himself Eric the Coder. And I just thought, I went and read through it again this morning. I'd read it before and I just thought it was really good. And for lack of better words, kind of summing up or summarizing what we've done so far. Now, I'm not going to go over any of this other than to just very, very quickly walk through it with you. All right. And I noticed that sometimes in here, instead of express, he calls it express, but he means express. But he goes through what a web server is, what client server is, what request response are. I don't think you need that stuff anymore. All right. But he does then go into what an API is, etc. The most commonly used API, verbs and actions. Again, this is all stuff you've had. Then he talks a little bit about REST architecture and basically how to set up a project that has REST architecture in it. And then he kind of finishes up here by talking about, different routes and how you would do things. Again, this is all stuff that we have done. All right. But there's a couple things in here as we get in here that are new. All right. And that's why I decided to go through this thing with you. I'd like you to take some time, not this second, of course, but soon to go through this. All right. And there's if we go through all of it, there's a boatload of code to put in, but you can copy and paste all of it. The problem is always with copy and paste is I never know how much people understand if all they do is copy and paste and they never look at the code. And everybody's different. Some people take the time to key in some, most, or all of it. Some people key in none of it. All right. And I get all that stuff. All right. So they have you start to create this really simple API. But what you see in here is basically they've set up a very simple thing with 3 products in it: an iPhone, an iPad, and an iWatch. And they've got a price for each one of those. It's no big thing. But like I said, there were a few things as I looked through here that I thought would be interesting to go over with you. All right. I'm hoping that this all makes sense, that this is JSON, and JSON again is basically key value. It's key name, value iPhone, key price, value 800, etc. All right. Now, when you look in here, that's a different command. That's not a misspelling. All right. When you go and you run the commands like we've been doing, we've always done stuff like npm run dev start, etc. In a few weeks from now, when we get into where we're starting to talk about React, we'll start to see npx. And at that time, we'll start to go through some of the differences between npx and npm. It's not important right now. I just wanted to point that out to you. That's it. All right. So if you go through this first example that's here, and you go out and either you go out to your local host and do this, or you go out to Postman, it's not much, but this is what you're going to see. So they had you create basically the equivalent of an API where when you look at it, there are 3 records in here. Now, when I say there are 3 records, what I'm doing is I'm talking, for lack of better words, I'm talking MySQL-like. All right. Once we get into, in just a few minutes, when we start talking about MongoDB, they're not called records anymore. Okay. They're called documents. And you might say, well, big deal. We're going to start talking about why that is so, etc., in just a little bit. The other thing, it's still referred to as a database, but we don't call them tables in MongoDB. All right, we call them collections. So collections are made up of documents, just like tables are made up of records. All right, and if you say, well, geez, why do they do that, etc., we're gonna go over it in just a bit. All right, so that was part 1 of this. It's a 6-part series, and let me just jump into part 2. In part 2, this is where it starts to change a little bit. This is why I'd like to give you some time this week to make sure you can go through this. I was going to originally I was going to have you go through it, key in the stuff or copy it and then turn it in. You don't have to do that. But I will tell you, it'll probably be in your best interest to go through the steps that are in here. One of the things that's new in here starts right here. And we've started to talk about this, but we haven't talked about it in much depth or breadth of coverage. What they do here, if you look up on your screen, and hopefully you can see this, that what I'm highlighting now that it's in gray says const products. So what they're doing is they're making a product array, and it's an array of product objects. That may not be new. What is new is we're putting this into an external file. All right. So we're putting this into an external file called products.js. Then, and just so you know, this line right here is part of the file. We are creating basically in here, we're going to look at this in just a little bit, but we are creating a new module that we're adding to our program. And once you create a new module and you add it to your program, hopefully you can, like I said, can see all this. That's how you bring it in. But that for the first time, we're bringing in or requiring our own module. All right. And what you should see and hopefully notice from there as well is it says const products equal require. Then in parentheses, it says dot/data.js. What that means is that file, the data.js, is in the same folder as our app.js or index.js or whatever they call this one. All right. So this is starting to show you here the idea of starting to break stuff up. All right. Now, what we're going to be getting to very shortly is really setting up an entire model view controller type of interface. All right. And yeah, it's very important that you understand all that stuff. We've talked a little bit about MVC before, but you are going to be breaking up your projects rather. You are going to have routes folders. You're going to have that basically will hold your controller type of information, your routing information, I should say. You're going to have a models folder that's going to hold all of your schemas. And we might end up putting some of the logic in there as well. You're going to have the views folder. Well, we already have that. And you know what that views folder is for. All right. So like I said, it's not like there's a lot new in here, but I just wanted to mention that to you. What they're starting to do is they're starting to segregate parts of the project out from one another. And that's typically the way that this is done. Because if you don't do that, then what ends up happening is the file that I've been calling app.js, and again, some people call it index.js or server.js. it doesn't matter. But that file starts to get a little bit of code bloat in that it's such a big file, it can actually slow down processing. So it actually makes sense to take your project and break it up into different folders, into different files in different folders. All right. So other than that, there's not really a lot new in this particular example that they're showing. Okay. They do start to get into, as it says here, route parameters. But guess what? You know what those are already, even if you don't think you do. And what I mean is, the idea is here, as they show, if you just would go to /API/products, just like that, you'd get everything. But if you'd add the colon, we've been just saying colon ID. We could have said, with what we worked on last week, we could have said colon book ID. It wouldn't have mattered. That's just a name. That's a placeholder for which we are putting in an actual ID value. All right. The other thing that I wanted to mention, because it made me think of a few things, and that is what you're going to see when we start getting into MongoDB and you create your own, you start to go in and you start to create your own collections and your own documents. There's two ways that you can do this. And the first way that I'm going to show you today is actually not the recommended way. All right. But you might say, well, then why are you showing it to us? It's an easier way of working with it. And then we're going to eventually get into the quote right way, unquote. All right. So you're going to see all that stuff. All right. So let's see. I said the other thing that was new in here, we've seen this a little bit, but I want us to get more cognizant of returning stuff. So if you are expecting something and it's not there, being able to, as it says there, do a res.status rather with a 404. That product not found is just a message you put in. But that's the way that you should be writing things, on the chance that somebody goes in and takes a look at your code and says, well, geez, what happens if I do this? Well, we don't want it where it's out there on an island. We want it to say books not found, whatever, not found, etc. All right. The other thing that's in there, we've talked about this before, is the usage of a query string. All right. So where a query string can become very important is if you decide that what you want is, rather than seeing all fields when you do a query, which is pretty much what we've been doing thus far, but if you only want select fields. All right. So how do you get those select fields? Well, if you take a look in here, they're using one of the ES5, ES6 JavaScript array functions, and that being the filter function. All right. So as it says in here, like everything else, Express has an easy way to grab data from the query string. You can use the req.query to retrieve what's in the string and then work with it. The other thing to be cognizant of here is when you look at this, all right, it says no products matched your search. But what may look a little funny about that is you're returning a 200, which means okay. But that's very similar to what we were doing inside of MySQL, where you'd write a query and the query would be actually set up, constructed correctly, but there was no data that met the query that you would put in. That's the same thing they're showing here. All right. So like I said, I'm just very quickly trying to kind of rush through this, but talk about a few things that are in here, and then we're going to jump right into the Mongo stuff. All right, then in part 3, they talk about middleware. And again, I thought this was very well written, because you've used middleware already, whether you realize it or not. All right, anytime we've been using Express and we did an app.use, the use means you're bringing in middleware. But not only can you go in and utilize middleware that's that's been pre-written, third-party middleware, you can write your own middleware. All right. What's the advantage of doing that? Well, if you need to customize something, for example, If you set up middleware and you do the app.use and you put it basically in your app.js file, then by default, it's going to try to apply that middleware to every page you have on your site. But maybe that's not what you want. Maybe you want to write some special middleware that only goes on a certain page, or maybe you want to check something, and if it's A, you want to run this type of middleware, and if it's B, you want to run this type of middleware. That's what's discussed in this particular document. These are all small. They're 4 or 5 pages. The last one's a little longer. We'll talk about that in just a bit. But as it says, the idea behind middleware is it sits between the request and the response. It's in the middle. Now, who cares? You should care. When you use third-party middleware, all right, it pretty much, is standard. It's kind of what we've been doing so far. But when you write your own middleware, it can clear up a lot of stuff in your code. Now, they give an example here. It says, let's assume we want a function to log all URL addresses of the request each time a page is visited. Then it says you could do it without middleware. Virtually anything you do with middleware, you could do without middleware. All right. But even things like when we use express and you say const app equals express, it's a line of code. All right. That, I think from what I read, that replaces about 45 lines of code if you had to write it yourself. All right. So it says you could do this and it's just fine. You could put this in your routes. All right. So in your about route, you could have something like that. But it says, what if you have 100 different routes? You don't want to copy and paste it. So as it says, one solution would be to write your own middleware function. And when you look here, I'm on page 2 of 4, and at the top of the page, what's new in here is this. When you write your own middleware, in addition to request and response, or REQ and RES, you must provide one additional parameter, that meaning next. And almost always you're going to call it like this. And for lack of better words, what it means is, hey, control should go back to whatever call this. All right. Now you don't have to do it you don't have to call next like that. And we'll see an example of this in just a bit, but it's pretty often that's the way it's done. All right. And again, what that can end up doing is it can mean that rather than taking the same code and putting it all over the place, you again can put it into one place and then call it on an as needed basis. Oftentimes too, what programmers do is they will have, in addition to like a routes folder and a models folder and a views folder and a public folder, they'll oftentimes have a middleware folder, which will hold their own middleware. So again, you can see this segregation that I mentioned before of the different parts that you have in a project. All right. So as it says, when you create middleware, you're not forced to use the next at the end. Here, for example, they're sending you to some custom page, but you need to put that parameter in there, and you need to have a way at the end. Again, it's normally next paren, but you need to have a way to get yourself out of the middleware. And that's what they're talking about in here. All right. Yeah, as it says, middleware can change the request object, and they show a simple example in there. All right, like I said, I'm just trying to run through this before we get going in earnest here with what we're going to be talking about today. So part 4, this is all the stuff we've talked about. All right. So they have you literally go in and create a CRUD API. And then they talk about some of the things that can be returned. I'm not going to read one of them to you. But again, just realize that in the 200s, everything worked. In the 400s, it was a problem on your end. In the 500s, it's a problem on the other end. So if you're the client, 400 errors are client errors. 500 errors are server errors. So they have you go ahead and this is a running project. And like I said, I thought of having you do it. You feel free to do it if you want to. You sure as heck don't have to. All right. Okay, let me do the last major section that's in here, which is section 5. This is again where it starts to kind of split out. We've looked a little at this, but not nearly as much as we could have or will look at. And that is, they talk in here about express router. All right. It says by now you'll notice that the basically your index.js or whatever you call it, server.js, app.js gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But the idea is, again, you want to split that, grab that code and put it into its own folder. And that, as you may or may not have guessed already, there's different ways that you can do this. All right, what some people do is they create a routes folder, and then they create a different .js file for every route they put in there. Other people create one route.js file, and they keep putting all the routes in there. All right. And when you do that, regardless of the way that you do it, you are going to end up either exporting that file or exporting those files and bringing them into your program. Okay. All right. So what they've done here, when you take a look at it, is they've had you go back and set up a bunch of routes. In fact, they're going to either that or they do it later. I don't remember. But then notice what we have here. Those are the 5 major operations that we've looked at so far. Now, we may not call them get, create, update, and delete. We do call it delete. We do call it get, but we've been calling, if we wanted something new, we've been calling it, doing it in app.post, for example. All right, you can see that down here. So they are creating an array that's going to hold all this. All right. And we're bringing in that products file that we talked about before. So you'll notice, as it says, here is an example of a route and a controller file. All right. So we set up those different routes. So again, all of this stuff that's in here, everything that's in here, that's all part of the same file. And what we've been doing is always, const app equal express, then app.get, app.post, app.put, etc. That's not the way it's done out in the quote real world, unquote. Instead, as they show right here, you bring in express and you bring in a feature of express that's called router. And it's very easy to make this mistake. Many people do. That router does have a capital R in it. You don't have to call this router, but again, historically, because of standards, that's what people call it. All right. And you take your routes, and like I said, either you put all of them into a file like this, or you put each one into its own file. Why would you do one as opposed to the other? Well, if your routes are getting really complex and you've got lines and lines and lines of code, you might want to consider putting them into separate files for the same reason that we talked about before. Because now it wouldn't be your app.js file that would be getting bigger. It would be like if you had a route.js or something like that, it would start getting bigger. All right. But as of right now, it's not bad. They've got 5 routes here. We put them in an array. All right. And they all are going to now have access to this products.js file, which again, were those 3 products, those 3 Apple products, the iPhone, the iWatch, and the iPad that we looked at before. And then again, this has to start making sense to you. All right, slash, okay, is going to get you to get products. Slash with an ID is going to get you, again, to get product as opposed to products, etc. I'm not going to read them all to you. But again, one of the key things here is this. All right, module.exports equals router. All right, what that is doing is it's taking what we created up here and everything that it's connected to. so which is all our routes, and we're exporting them. When you export like this, there's different ways that you can do it, just so you know. For instance, if we wrote, with this one right here, let's say that for whatever reason, this route that was right here, we didn't want to make that available to anybody else. We could literally come in here and say right here, we could type in module.exports equal, and we could do each one of these things individually. Since we're using all of them, there's no sense in doing that. Sometimes you will see the module.exports at the beginning of the file. Most times you'll see the module.exports at the end of the file. All right. And what is this module.exports? That's where we're going in just a minute. All right. So again, they've got a lot of code in here. I'm not going to go through this code. All right. The last one that's in here, because this is a 6-part series, I'm not going to go over with you at all, other than to just show it to you. All right. Why? Because part 6 is on what we're going to be getting towards near the end of the week, and that is using a Mongo database with this. All right. So like I said, I don't want to say any more about it. They walk you through, and they walk you through using Atlas, which we'll use, but not right away. All right. I think, and maybe I'm wrong here, but when you end up using Mongo Atlas, Atlas is a cloud-based service, okay, which is great. But you also need to have the ability to work on something on your own machine. And what I mean is when you're in the testing phase and you're creating databases and working on them, you probably don't want to go and use some kind of a cloud product. You can, but if you're going to develop your database before you're even developing the node application, then you would basically want to do it more from a command line, and that's what we'll be doing in just a bit. All right, so let me close a bunch of these just to make my life a little bit easier. So like I said, when you get the time, and I know everybody, I don't have time, whatever. I'm tired of having this argument with people. All right, not you guys, but I've had quite a few of the first year students when I've said, well, geez, I barely have time. I watch your tapes because I work during the day and I don't have time to do this and I don't have time to do that. You know what? None of us has enough time to do everything we want to do. All right. But most people, if you have to, you make the time. That's all I can say to you. All right. So I'm going to jump into the internet, and hopefully that's what you see on your screen right now. And if you don't, you're going to let me know. But I'm going to go out to npmjs.org. No, in fact, I'm not even going to do that. I'm going to go out to nodejs.org. All right, so I'm out at nodejs.org, and I want to go to the, let's see. I think the docs, and I'm just going to grab the newest one here, which is what we're using, which is version 16.17.1. And I'm going to go down in here until I find modules. All right. And you notice there's a bunch of them. There's common modules, there's ECMA modules, there's module packages. I'm going to go to the modules for now, at least, the one that says module API. All right. Why? Because what they talk about in here is the stuff that I've been kind of talking about, but didn't spend all that much time on. In other words, they tell you in here how you can go in and set up your own modules, do the export, and everything that you have to do in here. I thought it was this one. Maybe it is one of the other two. I don't remember, or 2 or 3. I don't remember. But in here, they do a good job of explaining the stuff that's in here. All right. So there's some common modules, etc. But there's one of these that's in here has got some steps. I wish I'd have written it down, but I guess I didn't. That go through and explain all this stuff and how it should be done. And I was thinking to myself, I need a good way to basically demo this. So this is what we're going to end up doing. We're going to, in literally about 2 minutes, we're going to start on the Mongo portion of the class. We're going to look at MongoDB, but we're going to look at it from the command line today and tomorrow. All right. Then on Thursday, we're going to start getting into talking about Mongoose. All right. Why is that important? We're going to actually go in and we're going to create another app together as a class starting later this week. All right. And in that app, I just decided, because it's kind of standard and many people do this, we're going to create our own to-do list app. Okay. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create it, and it's going to be very simplistic. All right. But we're going to create it, and it's going to give me a chance to show you some stuff with exporting and doing a few other things. Now, when we create it, just so you've been told, it's going to be butt ugly. I'm going to let you do all the formatting on it. So you are going to put in your own CSS and make it look the way you want it to look, because again, I want it to be your project. All right. After we get that up and running and working, then we're going to go in and we're going to basically take that data, because if we want that data to persist, so if we want to go in and be able to create a to-do list and have it persist, we can do it without a database. We could either A, use files, which to me would be a crummy way of doing it, but you could, or B, we could use local storage. And local storage is fine, but local storage, two things about it. First of all, it's limited in size. And second of all, the word local, you wouldn't be able to share it necessarily with anyone. So what we're going to do, and I don't know if we'll start it this week or if we're going to start it next week, I don't know. But we're going to go in and we're going to create an application, a to-do list application, and then we're going to hook it up via Mongoose, all right, to a MongoDB database. And then ideally, what we'll do after that, and once we get it all up and running, is we're going to take it and port it out to the internet. So we're going to stick it out on a server provider someplace, a free provider. All right, just so you have some kind of an idea of what's going on. All right, so with all that said, the way that I'm going to go into this might seem a little roundabout, but this is the way I decided this morning that I was going to do it. The site, as you might guess, is mongodb.com. That's where I am right now. And under mongodb.com, the main site, I went to the docs, the documentation. All right. And underneath there's a manual. And as you can see over here, we're going to run through some of this stuff now until we get to our break. So again, it's a document database. And I mentioned that to you before. What does that mean? All right, what does it mean? Okay, it means that rather than using a tabular or table structure, you use a document structure. Now, relational databases, like SQL Server and MySQL and Oracle, and there are other ones as well. They're more mature. They've been around, some of them, for 50 years. Whereas MongoDB, they're considered to be more shiny and new. In other words, they haven't been around as long. Okay? What you should have noticed, and what you hopefully have noticed, is that when we went in and literally created our own databases using MySQL, that unless we took most of the fields that were in there, not the primary key, but unless we took most of the other fields in that were in there, and if you said not null on every field, well, that was fine. Okay. But you couldn't sit there. So if I created a table in MySQL and I had 4 fields in it, a primary key, then field 1, then field 2, then field 3, those 4 fields. All right. And that was my schema. I couldn't decide that for one record, I wanted to make it different. In other words, I wanted one record to have one more field than the other ones. I couldn't do that. In order to do that, I would have to go back to my schema, add another field, and make it null in all the ones except for the one where I wanted there to be a value. That's a poor way of implementing something. All right. And again, my SQL and virtually every, I know probably 4 different relational database management systems or RDBMSs. And to my knowledge, all of them, at least those 4, they all require a schema. All right. So they're not that flexible to change. You could say they're inflexible. All right. On the other hand, MongoDB is very flexible to change. After we go and we download this and we start going through some examples, albeit they'll be pretty simple, you'll be like, wait a minute, you can do that? Yes, you can. All right. You can make each record look different than each other record. Now, you typically wouldn't want to do that. All right. You typically would not want to do that. But think about it. When we've been working with things like, as an example, when you've had customers and you've had products and you've had orders, all right? I think you'd all agree that what we've been doing with that stuff so far is we've been breaking it into 3 tables. We had a customers table, we had a products table, and we had an orders table, or however it would be. It doesn't matter. And probably in the customers table, we would have a couple foreign keys in there, product ID and order ID, or doing it something like that. And then we would set up relationships. All right. And it would work fine. Again, this stuff has been around for 50 years. People have been using it. And if it wasn't good, it wouldn't have stood the test of time like it's done. All right. And it works great with these kinds of relationships. And, how complex can they be? Well, this. I had you do that assignment, the MySQL assignment, when you did the queries. And with some of you, we could have literally done a query that took all 8 of those tables and combined information from all 8. And we could have gotten that, we could have done that. We would have had 7 joins, but we could have done it. So really, MySQL is great as far as working with relationships, even complex relationships. Now, MongoDB, not so much. What you end up doing in the example that I just told you with customers and with products and with orders is, rather than having 3 different tables, you would typically have one table, and that one table would have 2 subtables in it. In other words, you would end up having a customers table, and inside of the customers table, not only would you have customers information, you would also have product information and order information. All right. This is one of the downfalls, so to speak, of NoSQL databases. They are not great with complex relationships. All right. You can end up with much more complex structures than you have with relational database management systems. And I should mention this too. It's not that it's a big thing, but when you hear this, and I may have even said this to you before, I don't know, but NoSQL does not mean there is no SQL in it. The NO in NoSQL stands for not only. So really, NoSQL means not only SQL. If you decide for whatever reason you wanted to basically set up your MongoDB tables so they worked almost exactly like MySQL tables, you could do a lot of it. I'm not saying you could make it would be a perfect match between the 2 of them, but you can use SQL-like things. All right. Where this is going to change is, as an example. All right. You're going to end up saying, if you want to go and if you're in MySQL and you want to create something new, you come in there and you use create. Here we're going to use insert, and there'll be 2 different inserts that we'll use, an insert one and an insert many. You can probably figure out what the difference between those are. Do we want to put in not one record? Do we want to put in one document, or do we want to put in multiple documents? There is an update one and an update many. For updates, there is a delete one and a delete many for deletions. The last thing I'm going to say before we get back into this is I don't know if you've ever heard of the term scaling. All right. And I'm just going to assume that with the way I'm going to put this, it doesn't make sense to you. Let's pretend for a second, and I don't know, other than Michael McLean, I don't know if any of the rest of you have ever seen the campus that we have at the Wentzville campus. There are 2 buildings. One of them may not be part of Rankin much longer. I don't know. I've heard rumors that they might get rid of that one building. And the other one is the building that basically, other than automotive, we're all in that building. All right. Well, the good news for Rankin is we've got a lot of, there's a lot of places to build out there. There's room. They could put up another building right next to the one they have if they wanted to do that. All right. But imagine for just a second. So imagine for just a second that we only had a certain amount of room. So in other words, we want to add 3 new programs, but we have no place to put them. And we only have this, let's say we're on a 2 or 3 acre plot of land. So what could we do? Well, if we were 2 stories, all right, we could close the campus for the summer and build a 3rd or a 4th story. All right. And that would be taking what we have and doing what's called scaling it vertically. So we'd be going upwards. All right. And really, when you start working with with relational database management systems like MySQL, like Oracle, etc., that's how you scale. You've got one machine and you typically end up giving it more and more processing power, etc. On the other hand, when you work with Mongo, it's more the case where, let's imagine that you had 10 acres and you built a different building on each acre and they were each 1 level tall, as opposed to having one building that was 10 stories tall. So whereas MySQL scales vertically, MongoDB scales, the way it's referred to is it scales horizontally. All right. So as it says, a record in MongoDB is a document. All right. So how does it change? First of all, and I believe that you guys are listening, but can you tell me, taking a look right here at this thing, what field is missing? What field don't we have right there? What's usually the first field that you put in all the time into your database? Come on, somebody?
An ID.
An ID. There's no ID. The ID will be created for you automatically. Or as my friend Doug used to say, automagically. You still can create your own. And if you do create your own, it's always _ID : then you give it a number. All right. The advantage of doing it that way, of creating your own IDs, is you're going to see in just a minute, when you let the system do it, how ugly the IDs are. Okay. They almost look like a real bad URL where they're 20 or 30 characters long. Okay. So it says here, MongoDB documents are similar to JSON objects. We've talked a little bit about JSON. You've seen this. The difference between MongoDB, what you see right there, and regular JSON is this is an offshoot of JSON that you see on your screen right here. It's called BSON, the letter B, S-O-N, and it stands for binary JSON. In JSON, when you write pure JSON, key, value, etc. But both the key and the value have to be in double quotes. All right. When you are working in MongoDB, the key does not have to be in double quotes. I believe it doesn't mind if you put it in there anyway. So we could have put double quote name, double quote here. You could have done that. All right. So there's a lot of different data types this can include. Okay. The biggest one is right here. you can have a field, all right? You can have a field in a document database that can hold multiple values. You cannot do that in a relational database management system like MySQL or SQL Server or Oracle, etc. You cannot. It's not permissible. But you can do this here. And it gets even bigger than that. What do I mean? Well, imagine here, and this example is fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the example that they're showing. Nothing wrong with it whatsoever. But imagine that instead of name, age, status, and groups, we wanted name, first name, last name, address, okay? We could come in here and inside of this structure you see right here, we could put a whole nother structure in there that had its own curly braces and its own fields. So we could come up with a new field called street address that could hold address, city, state, and zip. So we could put the equivalent of an object inside of an object or a nested object. This is one of the places where these databases shine as opposed to being able to use a relational database management system. Now, some of the stuff that's in here should look familiar to you in that, well, you've got name Sue. It's a string, right? So it's got to be in double quotes. Age, 26. It's an int, right? So it doesn't go into double quotes. All right. So they give you then a couple of advantages of using this. Documents correspond to native data types in many programming languages because of the fact that in many ways this BSON that I just mentioned to you, that BSON is an extension of JSON. Almost every programming language supports JSON. All right. So second, embedded documents and arrays reduce the need for expensive joins. So rather than us having to join 8 tables together, as I mentioned before, if we have everything in one table, it is going to work faster. All right. Next, dynamic schema supports fluent polymorphism. That's not going to make a heck of a lot of sense now, but basically, again, you are able to do things more on the fly when you work with a NoSQL type of database as opposed to a SQL database. All right. So we already mentioned this. MongoDB stores documents in collections. All right. So again, documents in collections. Collections are analogous to tables, where again, as documents are analogous to records. All right. It says, in addition to collections, MongoDB supports a couple of other things. Now, again, you don't have to understand even what these mean, but read-only views are pretty damn cool because what you can do is you can, I've given this example before. I don't know to you if I've given it to you guys or not, but to me, it's one that kind of crystallizes and makes sense of this. And that is, for example, when you think about somebody who's working at a bank and you think about somebody who's a bank teller, okay? Somebody who's a bank teller can probably, if you go in there, you go into a bank. I know most people don't go into banks anymore, but if you go into a bank, what can the teller do for you? Really, it's typically 3 things. The teller can either tell you your current balance, the teller can allow you to deposit money into an account, or the teller can allow you to withdraw money from an account. There's now, and again, if any of you are bank tellers, you can say, no, you're wrong. But pretty much, as far as I know at least, that's pretty much what tellers can do. And if I want to do something more, like if I want to talk to somebody about getting a loan, let's say, they're almost right away go like that. They're going to say, you have to talk to a personal banker. All right. So the reason I'm telling you this is if you decided there was some kind of information you wanted to give to a certain group of people and you wanted to let them look at it but not change it, maybe you wanted to start allowing tellers to do other things. So in other words, maybe they could get a list of all of the deposits you made and all of the withdrawals that you made, et cetera, something like that. But you might want to give it to them in only a read-only type of manner, all right? So they couldn't change anything, all right? And the on-demand materialized view, again, we're talking in there a little bit about the idea where you can take things and you can basically set up a lot of your stuff as the program's running. All right. MongoDB provides itself on data performance, data persistence. Okay, I've already told you about the embedded data models. All right, where you put something inside of something else. All right, and it says index support faster queries. Supposedly internally the indexes work better here. All right, so the next thing it says there is the Mongo Query API supports read and write operations as well as data aggregation. Guess what? You know what aggregation is. It's kind of totaling, where we did our minimums and our maximums and our sums, etc. Also text searching, you've done some of that. All right. And I've never done much of any work with geospatial queries. All right. But I'm going to come back to this in just a second, but I'm going to click here where it says CRUD. And just for a second, because we're going to look at this after the break. All right. So when you look at the CRUD operations, it's going to look a little weird when we do things, but you're going to start things out with DB, which, as hopefully you'd guess, stands for database. All right. And after DB, you put the name of the collection. After the break, we're going to install this. And after we install it, we're going to go in and create our first database. Then we'll create a collection. Then we'll create some documents underneath that so you can see what this is about. But you'll notice there's insert, insert one, and insert many. So again, when you look at this, you can, if you want to, put all of this on one line. You can. And sometimes you'll see that. I mean, there's only 3 fields. It would probably work just fine. All right. And you'll notice still got a paren, but unlike what we were doing back in the days when we were doing, well, last week, when we were doing the relational stuff, you don't need the word values in there. You don't need to list the fields in there, etc., like we had done before. All right. As it says, for examples, I'm not going to go there, but if you want to see some inserts, there's where you'd go. All right. Now, read. So that's the C for create. We use insert one and insert many. For the read, which is our read, the R in CRUD, you use the find operator. Okay. What you're going to find, no pun intended, but what you're going to find with that is it'll be DB, again for database, dot the name of your collection, dot find. And when you do that, it's going to return for you every document that's in the collection. Again, like every, not this, pretty much like every record in the table. All right. Now, when you do this, a couple things. First of all, and they don't really say it in here, but it's not that it's a big thing, but sometimes when you do this, you're going to get really ugly output. And if you say, I don't know what you mean, you will after the break. All right. You sometimes get really ugly output. All right. So what you can put on the end there, after you put DB dot, whatever the name of your collection is, dot find, paren, you can put another dot there, and you can literally put in the word pretty, PRETTY, paren, and it'll give you output that looks more like this, as opposed to putting everything on one big line. All right. Okay. So again, there's more examples. You can, hopefully this makes sense to you, that not only can you do a db.collection.find, you can put all sorts of things into those parentheses. If I've got 1 million records, I don't want to do a find typically and get 1 million records. I may want to just be looking for certain things. All right, so I can put criteria in there. All right, update. Okay, notice update one, update many, and replace one. I don't use the replace much, but the update one and the update many should make sense. All right, these will dovetail, in my humble opinion, much nicer when we go in and we start thinking more about, when we do updates, about doing patches, which remember are partial updates, as opposed to doing puts, which are full updates. All right. So again, you're going to see stuff like this, and this looks really weird. All right. So update many. And literally, what is this saying? It's basically saying that if you've got people who are less than 18 years old, you're setting their status to reject. What could this be? This could be something as simple as, letting people into a movie theater or not, something like that. But again, you're going to see a bunch of examples here. I would strongly suggest I'm only going to go till about 2 o'clock. So we're going to get this done, but we're not going to get that much into it today because I told people that I'm not going to lecture more than 2 hours or so. So if I have to, I'll give you another break. We'll see how it goes. And I'll give you another break because we're going to take one in a minute. But I'll give you another break at around 2, but we'll be done by 2:30 today. All right. So finally, the last thing that's in here are delete operations. And again, there's a delete one and a delete many, and there are more examples. All right. So didn't get as far as I thought we'd probably get in the first hour, but it's 101. Let's take 10 minutes, please. Come back at 111, and we are right then and there. We're going to start doing the immediately start doing the install. Okay. I'll be back in a couple minutes. All right, it is 1:11, so I'm assuming that you're both back. There's just John, you and Clayton are the only two live right now. And guess I have to ask for the other four that you guys just do this on your own. So if you would please go out to mongodb.com if you're not there already. All right. And what you should notice then, double check, just make sure I don't have any. Okay, not a problem. Okay. So under mongodb.com, get back to where I was. There we go. Um, Up in the upper right-hand corner, click the try free button. All right. Now, over on the side here, they talk about Atlas. We're not going to be worrying about Atlas for right now, but go over to the sign up. All right. And as always, put in your first name, your last name. I would put down Rankin Technical College for the company. I would use your Rankin email. I'm asking you to do that. And you come up with your own password. Now, this password is the password that basically will get you into the system. All right. If you're not good with passwords, then make sure that you write it down or do whatever you do with them. All right. Then you'll have to agree with the term of service and you should be able to create, it says, your Atlas account. Now, they mentioned here, it says you can also sign up with Google. I don't really care how you do it. I just want you to get an account. All right. I should already have an account. So if I go to sign in here, oh, that'll be interesting because if I do put in JP Scott at rankin.edu, I'm sure the next thing it's going to ask me is for my password, which well, there is something in there. Good. So log in. All right. Mountains or hills. Lovely. Verify your identity. Okay, it's going to send something to my phone. I just want to make sure that in a minute where you're going to be and where I'm going to be are the same thing. So give me just a second here. If you are not on this regularly, so if you work on it today and then you don't work on it for a few days or whatever, you'll probably have to go through this process as well. Sometimes if I work on this for several days in a row, it doesn't ask me any of that stuff. It doesn't request a code, etc. It just works. All right. So I take it for granted that you were all able to do that. Then hopefully, you may, I'm not sure where it pushed you. All right. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back here to the main page. All right. Like I said, I'm not sure if this is where you are or if it's not where you are. Okay. I've tried doing this before where I've basically tried to get rid of my account and then recreate it so I could do it along with the students. It was such a cluster that I had to contact them in order to clear up the problems that I had. So that's why I don't do it like that anymore. Now, what I'm hoping is someplace in here. Now, again, this changes too a lot. All right, from when I did it last time, this has changed tremendously. All right, so let's see. Okay, let me let me check one thing here because I want to make sure I'm telling you this the right way. So put that into mind and see if this gets us to the same place here. Okay. then I'd like you to please, I'm going to give you a URL and I will make it bigger and I'll put it out here so you can all do this. It said, I know I've done it this way before and it's worked. That's what I'm shooting for here is by the end of the period. Yeah, I'd like it if we had a chance to do to check out a couple things, but even more than that, I'm more concerned with us, everybody having the download, so. All right, let's make it bigger. Right. So if you put that in, you probably only need the mongodb.com/try/download/community, but if you'd please put that in. And I'll give you a second to do that. What may happen too, just so you're aware of this, is before we do all this or after we do it, I don't know. You may get told that you've got to go back to your Rankin email and verify the email. All right, when we did this last year, some students got that message, some did not. All right, so hopefully you've had a chance to put that in. And then hopefully it got you to this page, and I have to change my share again so you can see what I'm doing here. All right, so hopefully you are over here. All right, and it says here, you know, basically what do you want? Well, we want this. We want the MongoDB community server. Don't worry about the other ones. We'll talk about some of this stuff later. But it should say here, I would think, and I'm going to do mine with you because I uninstalled before. So if we have trouble, we're all going to have trouble because the version that I had was from a year ago. Okay. So it was actually from it was from last September. So it was more than a year ago. So yours should say 6.01 current Windows and MSI. And MSI is fine. That's actually an easier, I think, type of download. So click download. And that is going to start doing the download, as you'd guess. All right. And then what you should be able to do is to right mouse click over here and choose open when done. Again, I'm assuming that you're using Chrome. If you're not, I don't know where your downloads are, but you should be able to open it up from there. Hopefully, if this works for me and for you, it's going to bring up at that time then the installation wizard. All right, it's pretty much a step through installation. A couple things we'll take a look at, but pretty much it should work okay. So mine's coming up. I have no idea how fast yours does or does not come up. Can each of you please just give me a yell and say I'm there when your screen looks like mine when you get the leaf up here?
Yeah, mine is done.
Mine's done as well.
Okay, good. Like I said, I've done this in the past where I'll be going on and people say, wait a minute, mine's, I got a really slow machine. I get it. Okay, so this says welcome. It's got the version, etc. It's got all of the good stuff, etc. in it. Okay, and it says there the setup wizard will allow Mongo basically on your computer. Click next to continue. That's what we want. So of course we will click next. I printed out my own steps in here. As you'd probably guess, you must accept the licensing agreement. So click on there and again, click next. Now, we could do a custom install here The reason you might want to use a custom install here would be if you had a machine that you knew didn't have a whole heck of a lot of space on it. All right, but we're just going to choose the complete. So hopefully you won't have a problem with that. All right, as it says, all program features will be installed. There must be, it requires the most disk space and it's recommended for most users. So if you click on there, notice this is grayed out. So click on complete. All right. Believe it or not, we're halfway through it already. Okay. Now the recommendation is that you leave it set to run service as a network service user, not the local or domain user. Why? Because we don't have our own domain. All right. If we clicked on here, I'm not going to, but it would expect that stuff to be filled out. The other thing I always suggest that people do, I'm going to do it right now. I always suggest that people do is copy where it's got your data directory. Just copy that to the clipboard and put it someplace. All right. It's good to know where your databases are going to be stored. And that's what this is. All right. So we'll talk about that. And it's not, let me correct myself. That's where, for lack of better words, that's where all the software is going to be installed. All right. Including what's called MongoDB or MongoD. All right. And Mongo itself will be installed there. Okay. All right. So now we can click next. All right. Now, what it says right here is, do you also want to install MongoDB Compass? And it says there, by checking below, the installer will automatically download and install the latest version of Mongo Compass on this machine. Now, what we're going to be using a lot in here is going to end up being Atlas. All right. And what we're going to be using now is virtually the command line. What you get with Compass is it's kind of for lack of better words, it's kind of a hybrid between the two. And what I mean is it's sort of GUI and sort of not. All right. And I've had people before, when we did this a year ago, that I told them not to install it. Later, they said they wished they had it. If you think you've got room on your machine, you might as well check it and click next. I don't remember exactly how big this whole thing is. I'm sorry, I just don't. All right, but click next. Then to begin the installation, just click install. And you guys will have to know, or let me know rather, mine comes up and it says, even though I'm the owner, I need permission, so I click yes. All right. And it has some files need to be updated or are currently in use. This probably isn't what you have. All right. And I don't want to close the applications because two of them are Microsoft Teams, and I might end up booting you guys out of here, which I don't want to do. So if yours comes up, that's up to you, but I'm going to need to do a reboot later, it says. Okay, so I'm just going to click the do not close applications. You might not have even gotten this, and that's fine if you didn't. So I'm going to say do not close applications, and I'm going to click OK. It's not a very long installation. When it gets done, there'll be a finish button, as you'd probably guess, and we'll click that. And again, for those of you who might be watching this on tape, all right, please just take your time and go through the steps. The whole process you should be able to do it in 10 or 15 minutes. It's a one-time shot. Again, you probably already know this, but we're doing the community. All right. Had we done the enterprise, that ain't free. Okay, they've got different pricing plans for that. We're going to do a few things in here. I've never had them explained to me, and I've watched videos, etc., on how to do some of this stuff. I understand what you're doing. Sometimes I don't understand why you're doing it. All right, but there's going to be certain things we're going to have to do. Nothing terrible or anything like that. When this gets done, again, there'll be a finish button, and we'll just click finish, and that'll complete the installation. All right, mine is finished. I don't know if yours has or not. Either way, it's okay. But I'm going to click finish on mine. And what I want you to see, don't worry about this restart. I'm going to do that, but I'm going to do it later. It's no biggie. But Mongo runs on its own port. And the port that it uses is localhost 27017. All right. It shouldn't be a big thing for you one way or the other, but we will have to know that later. And if you don't worry about it. So it says I must restart my system for the configuration changes to take place. Click yes to restart now. No to manually restart later. I'm going to click no. All right. All right. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to break out of here before we do a new connection, or yours might not even look like mine. And if it doesn't, don't worry about it. All right. If it does not look like mine, don't worry about it. But the next thing I want us to do, yes.
I cannot see your I guess the MongoDB compass.
Yours doesn't show or what?
Yeah, I can't see it on your screen.
Okay, then let me redo my share, and then you tell me if you can or not. Okay. Is that, can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. And hopefully then that's what yours looks like. All right. Now I've got stuff over here, and you won't have the same stuff because this is stuff when I worked on it. Notice that's October of last year, December of last year. So this is stuff I've done in the past. Don't worry if you don't have anything there. It's totally fine. All right. But the next thing we have to do, and again, I'm going to show you this, but I'm going to have to do a few screen shares. Sorry, there's no other way of doing it. So what I'd like you to do is get into Windows Explorer, and I think you all know what that is. So I'm going to go into Explorer myself here, which will necessitate me changing my share. So I'd like you to be in File Explorer. All right. And I don't know, I don't see any of your machines, of course. Most people, your home drive is the C drive. For other people, it might be the D drive or something else. I'm going to give you some steps now, but I'm going to assume that your home drive is your C drive. So again, if yours is D or E or something else, you'll have to change that accordingly. But it's where your desktop is and everything else is. All right. So down here, and hopefully you can see this on mine, I'm going to go down to where it says local disk C:. I'm down here. And I'm going to click on that, and that brings up my C drive. All right. This is what I've got on my C drive. Okay. What you have to do here, and it's kind of weird because it's case sensitive and everything else, but if you've gotten to this point, so you're on your home drive, not at your desktop, but either at C colon or D colon or whatever, I want you to create a new folder in there, all lowercase, that's called data, D-A-T-A. So make a data folder under your C drive, D drive, or whatever. All right. And unless you've got questions, I'm just going to keep going. Open up that data folder by double clicking on it. And in there, you want to make another folder. And that folder is called DB. All right. So we made a data folder. And then inside of our data folder, we made another folder. All right. Let's see. All right. Now, what we're going to try to do here, I have no idea if it'll work or not because I have all my steps written down, but I didn't want to do them because sometimes when I've done this in the past, I'll do them, then it doesn't let me undo them so I can show the class. So I'm right where you are right now. That's why I had a data folder, I removed it. All right, I'm trying to start as much from scratch as all of you are doing. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring up a git bash window. So inside of here, it doesn't matter where you are. All right, you can do it right from DB or from data, it doesn't matter. But I'm right mouse clicking in my folder and I'm choosing git bash here. All right, and I'm going to go and change in my share to git bash because I want you to be able to see what it is that I'm about to do here. All right, so again, let me change my share. All right. Am I right in assuming you don't say anything? Am I right in assuming you can both see my git bash screen on here?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. All right. So I want us to get back to our home directory because that's where we want to run this from. So we're going to type in CD, hit the space bar and type in a tilde. Do you all know where the tilde is? It's way up in the upper left-hand corner, right underneath your escape key. Hold down on the shift and type in CD to tilde. And then hit enter. And you should notice that your path changed. All right. Unless you were already there, which is possible too. All right. Now, I'm not sure if this is going to work, but I've done it in the past and it's worked. So we're going to see right now. All right. But what we're putting in right now is technically it's a Linux file. So what we're trying to do may or may not work. And if it doesn't, it's no big thing. If it doesn't work for you, it probably won't work for me either. All right. Now we want to create a new file here. All right. But I just want to say we could come in and I could literally come in and like right mouse click and choose add new file, or there's a bunch of ways we could do it. One thing I may or may not have told you is there is at least a subset of the different Linux commands that you can use in here. One is the touch command. So I want you to type in touch space dot bash underscore profile. I'm not going to hit enter. So I'm going to give you a second to put that in. And we have to type in literally, we're going to type in 2 lines into there. 2 lines. That's it. Okay. So touch space bash.profile. There it is. Now, just so I can see if it's there, if I do an ls minus a, you don't have to do this. But one of the things that should be listed there, if I do that in my mess, it should be there someplace. All right. And I'm not worried, even if it doesn't show, I'm not worried. All right. So we have to put in 2 lines of code. What we're attempting to do here, what we are attempting to do is to set up a couple aliases so that we can run this from our desktop or wherever you plan on running this without having to constantly change directories. All right, so give me a second here. You're not going to see this on the screen, but I've got to set something up here, so give me just a second. Going through my notes and grabbing the stuff that we need. All right, so get rid of that. I'm going to have to do one more screen share, but first, before I do that, I'm going to bring this up good. All right. Let's see. All right. Right now, this is what we have. That's what we used when we did our download. We don't even need that anymore. All right. These are the 2 lines. So we have to open up that file and we have to put in these 2 lines. Before we do that, let's just go over what they're doing. All right. So they're right here. Maybe I can make it bigger than that, like 32 would probably work. So we're going to have to go in and open up the file that we just created and put in these 2 lines. What they are saying are, when we run MonGod, which, for lack of better words, MonGod is kind of like when we run NodeMon. We need that basically to be kind of running in the background. It's not really even like NodeMon. It's like when we do an npm run dev start, whether we're doing it in NodeMon or not. MonGod is going to run in the background, for lack of better words. All right. And we also then we're going to want to run Mongo. All right. So I don't care how you do it. You can use Notepad, Notepad++. You can try to bring this file up in VS Code. It doesn't matter. But I need you to bring up this file that's called your touch file. All right. So for instance, I could come in here and I could get into VS Code. All right. And then just put in these 2 lines. Now, the other thing too is when you look at this, I just want you to see this. There is a space here. You know what? Let me do this. I'm gonna grab these 2 lines and I'm gonna email them to you right now. I should have done that before. That makes a lot more sense to me. So let me email them to you. And the status thing on it's just going to say MongoDB files, even though they're not files. All right, so I've got them right here and they're being sent right now. So that should be there in a matter of seconds. Now, one thing we have to check first, one thing we have to check. All right, you can put those you know, you can open up your file and you can put those 2 lines in. Totally fine, except we're not running version 4.0.
Mr.
All
Scott,
right. Yes,
do we put those lines together, or should we put them in separate?
they should be separate lines, but they should both be into the same file. But they're two different lines. All right. Now, if you remember, and I mean, I'm going to do this just so you see it, okay? You don't have to do what I'm about to do, but I want you to see this. And what I mean is this. I'm going to go in here, I'm going to stop my share, and I'm going to see if on my share I still have, there it is. There's my data thing. So hopefully what you see on your screen right now is my DB folder, all right here. But I'm going to go and I'm going to go over to C:\program space files /MongoDB/server. All right. Of course it wouldn't find it. So let's see if I can find it the other way. So I'm going over to program files. Maybe I misspelled something. I don't know. What is the problem? All right. C:, doing it like that. So I'm just going to go to C:. There I am. There's program files right here. Underneath there, I should now have something that's called Mongo or MongoDB. There it is. All right. Underneath that, I should have something called server. All right. Then what you'll notice, yours might look different than mine. It's totally okay. But the version that we're using is 6.0 is what it says right there. All right. Then inside of there, there's a bin folder, and that's where all the magical files are, so to speak. So that's where MongoD.exe is, and that's where Mongo.exe is. Why did I waste your time telling you that? I'm going to show you right now. Okay. All right. I'm going to have to change my share, so bear with me for a second. All right. Now, I don't know if this will work. Can I do a code dot from here? I don't know. Yes, I trust them. So let's see. I'm just going to go in through Notepad++, so you'll see what I'm doing in just a second.
Mr. Scott.
Yes.
So in mine, I only have the 6.0.
Yeah, don't worry if you don't have a 5.0. I think that's remnants from when I had it last year.
Okay.
All right, because I removed a bunch of stuff, but there's certain files, it'll let you go and add stuff on top of them, but it doesn't let me remove them. So yeah, don't worry. Now, you don't have to put this in, but this right here, that's the path I just went to. And again, if I go in there and I go down a little further, I think it was bin then, that's where the executables are, just so you know that. All right, is that a big thing? No, but I just wanted you to see it. All right, now I'm going to grab the same files or the same two lines that you guys have. You won't see this for a second, but I'm going to go out and grab the email I just sent you. I'm going to grab those two lines. I'm copying to the clipboard now, and now I'm going back into here, and there they are. All right, I don't need these blank lines, but again, make sure yours says 6.0. All right. In fact, ours may have been 6.0.1, but I don't think that it'll matter if we say 6.0 or 6.0.1. Either one of them should work. All right. So let's see. All right. So this is saved. I want to save this. And again, where you want to save that to. Save that to. course, I have part of my notes and part of them aren't in here. So let's see. Based on the following code. Yeah. We did that. Well, we're going to know real fast whether this works or whether it doesn't work. I'm just going to grab this file right here, which should be this touch dot whatever. All right. And I want to save that. Basically, that's the advantage of doing it here. So it's desktop. I want to go to this folder and that folder, I think. You don't see that. I get it. But let's see. M1J4BEF. Let's see. I'm going to try just saving it right to my desktop. I don't know if it'll work or not, but touch profile. Isn't that what it was? No, it wasn't touch profile. It was bash underscore profile. So dot bash underscore profile. All right. So I've got that there. We're going to know right away whether or not this works in just a second. All right. And I'm going to try something first. And why don't I try it without you guys looking to see whether or not it works? So. Doesn't find it. And it doesn't find that. Great. We may have to use a different software package to do, and you already have it on your machines, but we may have to do this because I wrote this down just in case it didn't work. All right, so. Okay. Oh, this is going to be a lot of fun. So give me a second here to change my share one more time. The good news is we only have to do this once. All right. I'd like you, if you would, please, I'm going to totally, I don't remember, how do I get out of this? I'm using an editor that'll allow us to work inside of am I right in assuming, can you see my my Git Bash window right now?
Yes.
Okay. Then what I'd like you to both do is right now type in here VIM vim dot bash underscore profile. And that should bring up the one we just created. All right. And it probably will be empty. All right. Now, what we want to do is we want to copy in those two files, or those two lines of code. So I'm going back to my email I sent you and I'm copying them to the clipboard. So I'm back in here now. Now, to actually be able to start typing in here, you have to type in a capital I and then hit enter. And now you are in what's called insert mode. And it should say insert now at the bottom of your screen when you do that. If you try doing it and it doesn't work, you're going to have to let me know. All right. So now I want to paste in these two lines. That should work just fine. Now yours, depending on the width of your screen, notice it's not, there it is. Okay. Make sure, now I've got to change mine again because I've got to come back up here and change that to a 6, and I've got to change that to a 6. Make sure yours should look like this. If we find out later that we have to do a 6.0.1, we can. But when I remember doing this last year, it was like 5.0.3. We put 5.0 in here and it worked just fine. All right. If you've got all of that stuff in there, then what you have to do is you have to type in 4 letters. Hold down on your shift key and tap your colon key, not your semicolon, but your colon. So shift colon, and then type in W, all lowercase, Q, and an exclamation point. All right, WQ and an exclamation point. And then hit enter, and it should save it. Except that it didn't do it on mine because I was in the wrong place. I don't want it out here. Good golly. 0. I'm going to get my cursor so I'm back up here. All right. Colon WQ. It's still doing that. Doggone it. Oh, I've had problems. I hate this editor. That's why I was trying to have us do this without having to resort to using this editor. Of course, it's not. So, let's see. All right, I'm trying to go back to the first line up on top that's blank, and then do a colon, W, Q, exclamation point, and hit enter. Boy, oh boy, why isn't that? This is why I didn't want to do it this way. Oh, I hate this editor. Okay. All right. It's because I forgot to hit another key first. We're in insert mode. You can see that on your screen. Hit your escape key. That should get you out of insert mode. Then do the colon, W, Q, exclamation point, and hit enter. And I can say it again if you need me to. Have you both done that? Yes? Now,
Yeah.
what I'm going to show you now may not work on my machine because if you remember, it changed a bunch of my system settings and it told me that I needed to do a restart, which I don't want to do with you guys being on here. All right, so what I'm about to do may not work, but hopefully it'll work on your machines. All right, what I'd like you to do is, just so we've got something that we can work with, all right, first of all, close this session that you've got of Git Bash here. So just type in exit and hit enter. All right, that's the first thing. I'm going to have to change my share. I get that. All right, so I'm going to change my share and I'm just going to show you here. You don't have to be here. I'm going to go to my desktop. All right, and in my desktop here, on my desktop, I'm going to right mouse click right on the desktop itself. I'm going to right mouse click and I'm going to choose Git Bash here. You can do the same, please. Now you probably don't see my Git Bash here. I'll change my share in just a moment. All right, let me try something first. Well, hopefully yours is going to work. All right, so let me clear. And then you guys will tell me whether or not yours works, because if yours works, once I restart, mine should work as well. So let me come in here. Whoops. Let me come in here and change my share again. All right. So can you now both see my Git Bash window?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I've never tried doing this from Git Bash. I've only in the past tried doing it from a regular DOS command window. But since this is just another command line, what I'm doing and what I meant you to do should work. If it doesn't, then we'll try it from a regular DOS command window. Type in, if you would please, Mongo --version hit enter and tell me if you get a version or you get an error message.
I get an error message saying that no such file or directory.
All right, Clayton, do you get the same thing?
Yes.
All right, that stinks, because that's what I get too. All right, it's saying that it can't find it, no such file or directory. So the problem is, the reason that that's terrible is because really, we want to be able to run this from the desktop, but as a kludge, basically, I'm just giving you something that so we can see whether or not our stuff worked. Okay, so we're going to do this. You don't have to close. You can close your Git Bash window. All right, and then I'm going to show you again my. I'm going to show you my desktop here, so you should see that right now. And again, I'm going to go out to /program files /MongoDB /server and I'm going to hit enter. All right. And again, I know, John, you said you don't have a 6.0. It's fine. All right. But I'm going to go to 6.0 and I'm going to go to bin. And if you say, wait a minute, I don't get what you just did. Let me show you once again by changing my share exactly where I just went to. And again, all we're doing right now is just trying to verify that indeed the install worked. All right. So from in here, these were the lines we just put in. I want you to go there. And I am assuming that your C drive is your home drive. If it's not, change it to whatever your home drive is. You should be able to go here though, and it should show you your executables. Were you both able to do that?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So from there, what I'd like you to do, and I know my sharing is paused, I get it. Right mouse click right in that folder, do a git bash here from right there. All right. All right, because I put the same darn command in and it's telling me the same thing. No such version, and it shouldn't be doing that. We should be getting some information. All right. Well, I've got to fix this. So I'm telling you what, I'm going to call it for today. I will get this fixed by tomorrow. And as soon as we get on, what we're going to do is we're going to come in and we're going to start running some commands right away. We're going to go through the basic commands. After we go through the basic commands, we're going to go in and we're going to do the CRUD commands. All right. I apologize. For some reason, this bash thing doesn't like what I did. So I'm going to go back, retrace my steps, and see if I can figure out what the heck the problem is. All right. I apologize for this. We will get it to work by tomorrow, though. Okay. I'll see you tomorrow then.